Hello all. With the transition back to school and some of our students continuing with online learning until potentially September, and then we'll have to deal with transition, I've been looking at lots of resources in relation to mental health and well-being and how we can ease that transition. So I'm going to share some of those with you who hopefully will find this useful. And if there's anything else that you want to find out about, please do let me know afterwards. So I'm just going to share my screen. Okay, so in terms of these resources then, this is designed to think about how we can support staff and students with this transition back to school and how we can help them with the continued online learning whilst preparing them for the changes come September as well. Because whilst this won't necessarily affect everybody right now, it will do moving forwards. And it's best that we are prepared as staff for how both other members of staff and ourselves and all of the young people that we work with will be feeling. So a YouGov survey took place in May, and it found quite shockingly that actually 44% of teaching and non-teaching staff who are school-based are feeling stressed and anxious about the uncertainty at the moment. And 34% of teachers have expressed that they felt stressed and anxious about their well-being. So it definitely is something, whilst we're talking about anxiety and stress, that it isn't just in relation to the young people that we work with, it potentially could affect us too. Now, this quote might well ring true with some of us for either our staff, our students, our family members, the parents that we're working with. This is from Mind, who have been putting together lots of resources for mental health and well-being. And this idea that we all thought lockdown would be over and done with by now, things would be getting back to normal, we'd all be back at school, at work. But the longer it's going on for, the more hopeless everyone's getting. And whilst maybe we're not hopeless, but with things easing, there is still anxiety because there's that worry of, well, should we be easing? Should we still be in lockdown? How should we do this? And so it's this perpetual kind of unease. And actually that unease is where anxiety is triggered, because it's triggered through the perception of danger. If we think about it like a traffic light, we want people to be in green. Green is where we feel safe, we're relaxed, we're socially engaged, we're able to rest, we're able to process things. And actually most of the time we are in green. However, in this situation of a global pandemic, we've spent more of our time at yellow, where there is a danger factor. And when there's a danger factor, fight or flight, which is our natural self-protection instinct, kicks in. And so for many young people and adults, we've spent more time at a heightened sense of anxiety. And therefore, when we transition back to normality again and to that safe place, it's a bit more tricky because we felt heightened for so long. There's also the idea that we might hit red sometimes. That's when there is the potential threat to life and people will freeze. Now we're finding, as we're getting young people to think about the return to school, that for some young people, that concept is so scary that they don't want to even come into school. They've hit the freeze button, they can't make it in, they can't be there. And we've got to help teach them some techniques which are going to lower their anxiety level. We need them, even in the state of a global pandemic, to feel like we're as green as we can be. We're safe. We've mitigated for all of those dangers. And that's sometimes easier said than done. Because I don't know about everybody else, but with all of the uncertainty, it causes anxiety. Our heads can feel really overwhelmed, and we don't know what this is going to look like week to week, month to month, and we don't know what school will look like in September. And the human brain is designed to process things that it understands, that it knows, and this is new to us. So actually, it's not surprising that anxious feelings have been heightened for a lot of people. And the way young people are reacting is that we're seeing a lot more disrupted sleep and sleeplessness. So they, to some extent, have shifted their sleep patterns. many young people are rising sort of midday and going to bed early hours of the morning. So one of our transitions back to school that we're going to have to do is, to help them get back into a normal sleep pattern, which is really tricky. But that's what we're looking at in Headstrong at the moment, to try and help them manage that. There has been an increase in suicidal thoughts, but there's also been a bit of a decrease in people getting support because they don't want to use the NHS services, which is problematic. We've got anxiety in relation to school and how things will change. And they're feeling anxious about not only getting the schoolwork done, but also managing how they're feeling about everything. And young people and adults are not designed to have our freedom taken away. We're not designed to have to stay at home. Apologies. Hay fever is kicking in. And so taking away our freedom is really quite problematic, particularly for young people, because teenagers are meant to be developing their kind of wings. They're meant to be out and about and exploring what it means to be free and to have relationships with people outside of the family home. It's not normal for them to spend quite so much time at home with their parents. So that it's not surprising that we will see some potential issues as they head back to school. And some of the things that we need to be really mindful of as members of staff is the fact that there potentially will be some separation anxiety. We had some young people who, even prior to lockdown, really struggled with getting into school and leaving the family home. Now, for those young people, but also for potentially lots more of them, leaving home is going to be a much bigger challenge. So we're going to have to think about, how do we make school seem like an engaging place, an enjoyable place, a place that they want to be, and a safe place primarily. Because one of the things that they are still going to be worried about is their health and the health of those around them. So we need to be mindful of the language we're using around them and think about the positives that we can talk about in terms of how hand washing helps and how we're mitigating for the dangers. Another thing that young people in particular are concerned about, if you think about our year sevens, they were just getting to the point where they develop their new friendships. And they don't necessarily use online friendship platforms like older people might. And so there are struggles for young people as to, will my friends be the same people? Will it feel the same when I come back to them? Because these are fledgling relationships for many of them. So it can be really tricky. For our older students, we have that exam anxiety. They don't know, and we don't know yet, what those exams are going to look like. So there is a fear of the unknown. And we have to help support them to feel as confident as they can to do as well as they can. Now, for some of our young people, being at home is a real challenge. And so we potentially will have to deal with lots of young people who've had a tricky time due to the relationships with family. And we need to be prepared for the fact that we potentially will get some more safeguarding conversations, and we'll need to think about, how do we manage those? We might have to support parents to be able to build relationships with young people where it's become tricky, because we're not designed to homeschool our children. It's not how it's meant to happen. And this can cause a real tension in families. So we've got to be careful of that. For some of our young people and for some of our staff, the workload has felt like it's a kind of never-ending cycle. And whilst that is the case whilst we're working in school anyway, at the moment, with the constant emails coming in and the feedback and lots of assignments from all your teachers, some young people have found that so overwhelming they don't even know where to begin. So they just put their head in the sand and they ignore it. And we need to try and break that pattern for those who are still homeschooling, but also for those who are going to be heading back into school to help them manage their workload. We have young people who are worried about how school will be different. Will it look different? Will there be different expectations? And we need to make sure that our communication with those young people and their families is really regular so that they can see what their classrooms will look like. They know what the new rules will be, because we don't want any surprises. If we can ease their fears at this stage, it will make the transition back into school a lot easier. And we also have lots of young people in our school who have a desire to do things perfectly. They want to impress. They go back onto the Google Classroom to improve things after they've had feedback. They don't like not doing well. And we've got to help stem that, because at the moment it's about managing our expectations so that we're able to cope with it. We need to stop this pressure to do well the whole time and perform. And this anxiety often stems from a conflict between our emotional brain and our rational brain. Now, if we think of our emotional brain, a bit like the monkey brain, it's the animal brain, the amygdala. It reacts to stimulus that might be scary or funny, and it just reacts kind of in an emotional way. It doesn't necessarily think it through. So your rational brain would be able to tell you that school has done a risk assessment. It is safe. They would not have us back unless it was safe enough to be back. But your emotional brain will say, well, they may have done all of that, but actually I'm still really worried, because what if I'm the one who gets the bug? Or what if my friend isn't in my bubble or pod? Or what if X, Y, or Z happens? And if the emotional brain takes over, it's very hard to get it back without using some techniques. So some of the techniques I'm going to talk you through in this presentation are to help re-trigger the rational brain so that young people can work out how to behave and how to manage their emotions. One of the other things we have to consider is that for some of our young people, they will have lost family members and friends at this time, and they'll be going through the grief cycle. But even for those who haven't lost family and friends, there is a grief going on at the moment for the loss of the year 2020, basically, of that school year for them, because they wanted to be with their friends, they wanted to be in school, and they wanted to be learning. And so actually we have to accept that this is a journey that they're going to go on to the acceptance, and they will all be at different stages of that journey. I know when lockdown first happened, I was very much in denial. I was like, well, it will last for maybe 2 weeks. We'll be back at school after Easter. And then I was really shocked that we weren't. And I know for my children, they became frustrated and quite angry that they couldn't see their friends. They wanted to be in school. They didn't understand why they couldn't see their friends. It's not fair. And we have to help them get through those stages so that they actually can find a way to no longer feel overwhelmed and no longer feel like actually this is helpless, but we can accept that this has happened and this new way of living has come, and it doesn't have to be a bad way of living. It's just different. So even if they haven't lost somebody, we have to be aware of the grief that might be triggered. So having talked about all of the things that might be causing the anxiety, we need to think about actually how can we help our school community at this transition point to cope. And some of these things are we need to equip ourselves as teachers with the tools that we're going to need to talk to our young people now, even before they're back in the classroom, so that they can accept that the old way of doing things and the new way of doing things might be different, but they're not necessarily worse, they're just different. So one of the things we need to consider doing, whether young people are back in school or we're still teaching them remotely, is to start to give them goals again. Because whilst we're in lockdown, it was very much kind of a day-by-day survival. As we're coming out of lockdown and things are easing and we're going to go back to school, thinking a little bit further into the future, and thinking a little bit more about what our goals are can be really helpful, because then we're actually kind of goal focused rather than just focused on everything that's going on in our heads. Now, these don't have to be big goals. And for some of our young people, those goals are going to be things like, right, we're going to get you onto the school premises. They need to be SMART targets. So for our very, very anxious young people, something like getting you onto the school premises is going to be a big thing, but it's something that is very specific. They can achieve it. It is time-based. It's very relevant to them. It might be that we actually set something a little bit more. So it might be for those who are still home learning and they're maybe not engaging as well as we need them to, we might set them a target of, right, I want you to get this one piece of work done. Maybe don't worry about everything else, but I want that one piece of work done and I want it submitted on time, so that they know that they have to do it. It's not then this overwhelming process, but it is a manageable goal. And that's what we need to start doing, is getting them communicating with us so that they can manage. Now, this video explains the idea that actually a lot of this is down to mindset, and that's easier said than done. But it does give the idea that actually we can control how we're thinking about things, and that can then have a really positive impact on how we view situations in the world. I'll play that for you. If you can't hear it properly, I will share the PowerPoint as well. Here we go.
We are very sophisticated machines, but we are very predictable. So you know, my algorithm is very straightforward. I developed it because I could not really define what happiness was. So I took as many arbitrary points of data where I felt happy and tried to find what was common between them. What was common between them was the equation of happiness. And it is this: happiness is equal to or greater than the difference between the way you see the events of your life and your expectation of what life, of how life should behave. In the modern world, we mix two states. One of them is happiness and the other is fun. Happiness is that peaceful contentment feeling of, I like the world as it is right now. Fun is the modern world's replacement of happiness. It's, you know, when I am unable to reach that state of happiness, what I do is I go out on the weekend and I go to a party and boom, 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 and my brain stops thinking. As long as it stops thinking, I think I feel happy.
You came with the cataclysmic situation of losing your own son in appalling circumstances. Is that what this is all about? The successful man had everything, and then it goes.
I think losing Ali was the call to action. I lost my son all of a sudden, like from having a happy holiday together to losing him was 4 hours. And the question that hit me at the time was, what can I do now to bring him back? And nothing I could have ever done, including locking myself in a room and crying for the rest of my life, would bring him back. And to me, the whole idea was, I can either choose to suffer, or I can choose to sort of accept life as harsh as it has become and try to make it slightly better than it is today, so make it slightly better tomorrow. So the way I did it was very interesting. I basically set myself a target. I said, you know, I learned so much about happiness from my son. We developed my model together. Wouldn't it be amazing if I can reach out to 10 million people and just give them that message? Can you imagine a world where 10 million people are happier? It wouldn't bring Ali back, but it would be slightly better than the day he left.
And that's success for this project, right?
And that is truly, truly, I would say, success for my life. There has never been a moment in my life where I felt I was having a better impact on the world than this.
The fact is, we're just made differently, aren't we? I mean, we are, through DNA and our genealogy and our ancestry, we are either glass half full or we're glass half empty, or we're shades of both. That's how it is, isn't it?
The truth is, this glass is 2/3 full. The way you look at it doesn't matter. It is 2/3 full, right? And what happens for us in the modern world is we're taught to be critical. We're taught to look at this part of it because maybe it makes us look smarter, or maybe it's better for our survival. But the truth is the truth. If you have the ability to sit and watch Channel 4, you're much better off than being running around in the streets of Syria. You're okay. As a matter of fact, most of the time, if if you have the brain cycles to feel unhappy, that by definition means that there is nothing you should worry about now. Happiness is not about what the world gives you, how much water is in this glass. Happiness is about what you think about what the world gives you. If you think about it properly, you will always see there is something to be grateful, something to be happy about.
So as we can see there, it's a lot of this is about mindset, and we've got to help encourage our staff and our students and our parents to have that positive mindset about the experience that we've been through. Yes, it has been very challenging for some families, and it will have been more challenging for some of our families than others. But if we can find ways to think about what we've been going through in a positive way, that would be really good. Now, for those who are anxious, if we're working with them in the classroom, there are some key techniques to help people cope with anxiety. The 5-4-3-2-1 technique is very good at getting your rational brain working again. So it's about thinking about maybe 5 things you can see, 4 things you can touch. It's all explained on the PowerPoint here. You could use colours as well. So 5 things that are blue that you can see, 4 that are green. It really depends on how they're responding. Think about some of the breathing techniques. So you might want to use the square breathing. So that's where, if you imagine looking at a window, as you look at one side, you breathe in, you hold it as you go along the top, you breathe out as you go down the other side, you have a gap for the bottom, and you keep breathing, looking around that shape. Because it's about engaging the logical side of your brain, which is doing some thinking, rather than just the animalistic side of our brains. Interestingly, things like cold water can shock you into no longer being anxious as well. It's a really quick technique. And going for a walk outside, seeing green, is really good for your brain, because the way in which the green stimulates your eyes can calm you down. We also need to think about the fact that stress and anxiety can be managed through techniques that we put in place. So I'm sure we've heard of stress buckets before, but I think it's quite a useful thing to remind ourselves of now. So I'm going to show you a quick video about stress buckets as well.
Stress is usually seen as something we need to avoid. This is not true. We need stress, and we need our body's stress hormone cortisol to rise and fall throughout the day. Stress helps us wake up in the morning, helps us focus, learn, and remember new things. It's when people experience too much stress and start having difficulties coping that stress becomes a problem. High levels of stress can disrupt the natural changes in the body's stress response system and start to affect our physical and mental health. Over time, accumulated stress can result in false FFF response activations. When trying to measure our stress tolerance, the bucket analogy can be helpful. Our stress tolerance, or the size of our bucket, is a product of our genes, personality, and life experiences, and its size varies from person to person. The water in this analogy is the combination of all the stress in your life. We use the coping strategies we have available to keep our bucket from overflowing. They are like taps that allow water to drain from the bucket. Stress can include training, work, school, relationships, finances, moving, changing jobs, or the loss of a loved one. Both positive and negative experiences will affect the water level. A big bucket can hold more water or stress before it overflows. With a smaller bucket, less water is required for the water or stress level to become critical. While you can't change the size of your bucket, you can make life adjustments to reduce water coming in. You can also learn new coping strategies and stress management techniques to allow water to drain out. Mind tools, exercise, quality sleep, relaxation, and sharing your feelings with friends are some examples of effective water taps. Staying up late, sleeping in, drugs, inactivity, procrastination, suppressing or ignoring problems are examples of unhelpful coping strategies or false taps. They might give temporary relief, but actually result in water flowing back into your bucket. This video was created by Brave, building healthy.
So we can see that actually for a number of our young people, they probably have been using a lot of not particularly good coping strategies whilst we've been in lockdown. So they're going to bed much later, they've got disrupted sleeping patterns, they're probably quite lethargic some of the time. And we need to think about how can we make sure that they're doing more of the things like being active, talking to their friends, having decent sleep and relaxation to help them feel less stressed and less anxious. So we know that there are going to be people who are going to be struggling with financial pressures, with the fact that they've lost loved ones, the fact that we're living through a potentially dangerous pandemic as well. So we have to make sure that we are practicing these mindfulness, good time management, talking to our friends, all of these self-soothing, self-care models at the moment. We can't just do it when we're feeling anxious and stressed. We've got to have them in our lives every single day. Otherwise, they won't necessarily help us as well as they can when we need them to. We also need to think about the fact that some of our young people might be really struggling with their resilience levels. So some of our young people can really be stretched and they're really flexible, like an elastic band. You can stretch them and it will kind of ping back to shape. Some of them don't have that resilience though. You stretch them by giving them more work or a bit more of a challenging task and their band breaks and they give up. So we need to think about actually how can we encourage them to be resilient. So keep talking with that growth mindset. It's okay to struggle kind of language with our students, because that's really important to help them understand that it's the trying and the keeping going that is important. And this also links at the moment to what we've looked at previously with our behaviour model and the roots and fruits. The fact that actually the roots at the moment for some of our young people are going to be really quite challenging means that the fruits at the other side are potentially going to be tricky for us to deal with as well. So if we can help put things in place to help them manage their anxiety, their stresses, their family relationships, what we will see when they come back to school will be much more fruitful, positive behaviour. If we don't get the things right for them now, so the kind of helping them manage their emotions, helping them get the support that they need with their family, it will be more of a struggle for us as teachers. So I'm going to leave you with this quote, the idea that actually it's hard to let go of how things were, but we will find a new rhythm. We will find a new way of doing things in school. And it's okay to miss how it was before, but it doesn't mean that the way it is now is any worse. We just have to help all of our young people develop the resilience and the kind of strength that they need and the techniques that they need for self-care to make sure that they understand that this is okay and that this is a transition, it is a change, but it will be okay. And we have to be those strong adults who, even if we're feeling like it's not okay, we have to be a bit like a swan. We have to look calm and give them the kind of strength that they need at the moment to feel like it's safe. We're in green. We don't need to get worried. We don't need our fight or flight reflex to kick in, because even if the teachers are paddling away underneath, they don't need to see that. They need to see us as calm. So let me exit this and I'll say hello to everybody again. I'll stop presenting. Here we go. So hopefully you have found that useful. If anybody wants to know any more coping strategies for anxiety or anything else, there's lots on the Mind website, and I can also do some training for everybody on further anxiety training techniques and how to manage anxiety. So hopefully you found that useful. Do let me know if you need anything else in terms of mental health and well-being or any further information, because I have lots and lots of resources and links that I can send you. Okay, take care everybody. Thank you for watching.